Check 2, 1, 2.
Kill.
Welcome back. Graduated episode 12. I don't know if I should say the episode names, but huge up today. Huge up.
Yeah.
Talking to, I would say, a professional. I'd say an expert.
I hope so.
Huge expert here today. Her name's Allie Jewell. She's a PhD student?
Not yet. Not a candidate yet. That's
Okay.
after prospectus, which is like the stage I'm at right now. I
Okay.
haven't defended my prospectus, so.
Okay, that sounds Latin. So she's here. We're going to be talking about her thesis. I'm Monica, in case you guys didn't know that already. I guess I should introduce myself. Anyways, so we're going to talk to Allie about her educational journey that she is still on. She's going strong.
Right,
She's at
yeah.
the PH and the
D.
huge D
Yeah, man.
level that you're at. So I think, because I really think your thesis is like so worth us just kind of zooming in on. Usually we go through like the whole life thing, but let's start. So you were from Arkansas. Actually, no. Sorry. Before we even get there,
1992, born
I'm
and
skipping
raised.
past the best part, which is how we met.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you are dating my friend,
Yeah.
Jordan, who was
Yeah.
on, I think, episode 7.
Nice.
Was he episode 7? I don't remember what number, but he's previous. You can skip back a couple laps and hear his voice. Hear what
Yeah,
he's
go
like.
plug his episode.
Yeah, go plug him. Flavors, super hot DJ, Jordan
yeah.
Andrew. Yeah, he's the best.
Now
yeah,
film composer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's working on his
yeah.
first feature film right now.
Oh my
It's
God,
like huge.
deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, plug.
Yeah, so everyone get ready for that.
Dude, I honestly can't wait. It's going to be really good. I'm going to go
Yeah.
watch the movie with my eyes closed.
Yes.
The first time just for Jordan.
Yeah.
So we met through him, which is great because I don't want to say I like you more, but I mean,
can
I've known
say
him
it.
forever.
You can say
So
it.
it's like, this is a great addition to the family.
Yeah, I remember the first time meeting you, and I was like, "Oh, I really like her." Like, even if it doesn't work out with me and Jordan.
Yeah, I know. I thought the same thing. I was like, well, fuck, man. Like, I hope this shit works because
Yeah.
we're going to be homies and it might be weird, but he's just going to have to get used to it.
Yeah. So then, since then, we just
So-
like hang out and have really awesome combos.
Yes.
And so,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm stoked to talk about anxiety, but also like wherever that leads us.
Yeah.
You know,
Me too, because we usually go down some windy roads.
for sure.
Okay, so that's how we met. Now we go to your origin story, your hero
Yeah.
origin story. So you are from Arkansas.
Yes, I'm from the States, from the South.
Yeah.
And
If you can't hear that
if you
little
can't,
bit of South.
I mean, man, people ask if I try to lose my accent.
What?
Which no, I have not.
no, you gotta hang on to that. That's who you are, you know.
I mean, it's like barely there. If I get a little tipsy, it comes out. It's in the vowels mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm from Arkansas. I went to University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Go Hogs.
Go Hogs.
And yeah, so I have my bachelor's is in psychology.
Okay.
And then I have 2 minors in philosophy and classical studies.
Okay.
Because I'm a nerd. So,
Now whatever. We're all
so that is Latin.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I specialized in Latin.
nerd is Latin. No.
And yes.
Okay,
And so
two minors,
then I got my master's in philosophy
Okay.
there.
Okay.
And I specialized in philosophy of psychology.
Okay.
And then I transferred to UBC.
Right. Because you thought, oh my
And-
God, Canada. Because
Yeah.
who we just talked to before you, like a couple weeks ago, whatever, when the fuck that was. He's also from, he's from like Maryland.
Okay, but like,
he went to like Ohio University. He's from DC.
oh, okay.
Is that the same place? I always
Don't
get
know.
that area. Is to
DC
me,
is not Maryland.
okay, DC. I don't know why I said Maryland.
DC is like its own like little area.
Okay, I butchered that. Sorry, Issa.
okay.
But anyway, he also was like from the States and then came up to Vancouver and was just like, wow, this place is unreal. And like saw like
Yeah.
hawks flying around and
Right.
seals and was like, oh my God, it's just like the postcard. Like I must move here.
Yeah.
So is it similar for you?
I had never been to Canada,
Mhm.
and Arkansas is really beautiful, and I'm such like a country gal. I never really realized until I came here and I started saying sentences like, oh yeah, we used to go on the creek and catch crawdads with Pop. And then I was like, wow. That's very country. But no, so I had never been to Canada, so that really wasn't part of the decision. So while doing my studies in undergrad and graduate school, I also traveled to India 4 times. So I started an interest in Buddhism, specifically Tibetan Buddhism. And then I went back for 5 months and studied diligently interrelated nature is what it's called. And so basically looking at different studies and monastic studies that apply to 21st century modern people. So doing that and then using that for personal development. So that's kind of all in the background. And what I wanted to do in my PhD was combine psychology, neuroscience with philosophy and Tibetan Buddhism. And so looking at like who does that, there weren't people at that time at my program in Arkansas. Canada, there are some people. So Evan Thompson, he's a professor of philosophy at UBC, and he does that. He does cross-cultural philosophy of mind. And I was very much like, I need to go there. So I applied.
This is where my journey takes.
Yeah, exactly. Me. It was like, okay, well, this is the next step, you know? Like, here's someone that could help me on what I'm trying to do. And I got accepted. And I came to visit and just fell in love with the campus. And it was just so awesome.
It's the nicest campus
It's
ever.
so nice.
I love
it.
And especially right now when everything's blooming.
Yeah. And I did come in February, so it was, I think it had just snowed and snow had melted. But like I went to the Notobi Garden, which I don't know if you've ever been to that one. It's the Japanese garden by like the Asian studies. It's super cute. You would know. You would know. It has like little bridges and like a cute little pond, and it's really, really cute. So you should go.
Okay. Must see.
Must see. Yeah. So I went there and I was just like, yes. This just feels right, you know? And then I moved here. And from that time on, just trying to figure out what I wanted to research, what I wanted to write my dissertation on. And then that has just shape-shifted through years and now, you know, months. And so now it's anxiety, exactly what? That's been consistently changing. But yeah.
Okay.
So I do feel like after the end of all of this, no one will have thought about anxiety more than me. Because I do. True. I literally think about it every day.
Well, in the way that you think about it, in the way you approach it, isn't from an experiential point of view, but maybe that experience fades in and out too.
Exactly.
Where you're thinking about anxiety when you're not feeling anxious.
Yeah. But I do suffer from anxiety. And what I have realized is through researching anxiety, I now am able to understand my experience a little differently and bring myself out of it a lot easier. And so that's kind of cool to see that the theory behind what I'm working on is actually something that's applicable. Right. And so that's
through your own practice and experience. You're like, this can actually
help.
Yeah. We can cure anxiety today, people. But no, in all honesty, and I remember I was talking to a friend a couple months ago. Remember I sent you like a billion screenshots, and maybe not, but he was telling me how he suffered extremely bad fits of anxiety, and then he actually looked into the philosophy of it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Who does that? I feel like no one really thinks to put those two together, because I certainly wouldn't have.
Right.
And he was telling me that actually helped him a lot, and he doesn't have this, he just thinks about stress and stressors and anxiety triggers in a completely different way. And
right.
Like, that's cool. I'm like,
so I mean, that could be something like abstracting it away. You know what I mean? So he's no longer dealing with the actual phenomenon. He's kind of thinking it in more cognitive terms. And sometimes that can be helpful for sure. Kind of like disengage. So yeah, like there's all different therapies out there currently and all different frameworks for understanding anxiety. And so I've just been in the thick of it, of trying to figure out where I'm going to put myself and what I'm going to say. And yeah.
Well, how did your thesis come about? So when you moved here, you probably had one idea of what you were thinking your thesis was going to be about. And like, what were you thinking at that time?
So my master's thesis was on mind reading. which
Love.
which is just the terminology for basically, I guess, using theory of mind to understand what other people are thinking at a current moment. So you do it all the time. Like if someone walks in and slams their hands down, you're like, oh, they must be angry. That's an instance of mind reading. So you somehow come to the output of what they might be thinking, and then you assign it to that person. So I wrote
how we're wrong sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. Often we are wrong.
Yeah.
And so basically there's all different theories on how we do that. And I was just theorizing a different hypothesis. And so I thought of maybe doing something still within that area. But my interests at that time were like consciousness, emotion, the self. And so I knew I wanted to have something around those topics. And maybe, obviously bring in the Tibetan Buddhism as well. So I wasn't quite sure. Evan Thompson also works in enactivism, which is like...
What is that?
It's like a framework within philosophy of mind that basically has an enactive approach of understanding how the organism interacts with the world. Okay. So like... I guess the main dominant view right now is that we perceive the world as it is, or something like that, right? Even common sense, like you just take in what's there. An active view isn't really like that. It's saying that like perception isn't passive in that way. The organism, the person, and the world, or the environment, often are enacted together, right? So like I see that fruit as like something I can eat. And it's about this like relational reality between organism and world. So basically I was starting to look at that kind of stuff and seeing that in my mind it was missing pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
Some more like cognitive stuff I think needed to be added. And that's kind of how it started of me wanting to understand sense making, which is what they call the process of like evaluating the world in this like relational way. I wanted to understand when that breaks down, when sense-making goes wrong. And then that kind of started leading me to psychiatry, and then the pandemic happened.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was given all this extra time to think about what I wanted to focus on, what I was going to spend 2 to 7 years, researching and more. And I started to realize that given the disruption of our lives with the pandemic and people's, stationary life, like being at home and being on their phone, that anxiety cases were going to rise. So then I thought, okay, how do we explain anxiety? I started looking at some accounts and they all seemed wrong to me. So I wanted to give an inactive account of anxiety. And that's kind of how it started.
Okay. So by an active account of anxiety.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
So basically thinking about how anxiety isn't just this thing that like is computational. It's not just like you see something and you feel something and then you have anxiety. It's not really like these, computational parts of the mind. It's not like linear. There's all these feedback loops and there's all these dynamical causes that like underpin it. And that you can't extract away the organism. It's not just the brain has some dysfunction, as some accounts say. It's not just the person's thought. Like you have to take the person in the culture, in the embeddedness of the environment to really understand what's going on. So it's just kind of a more holistic way of thinking about it.
Right. And also too, like the whole temporal placement of it as well. Mm-hmm. And where that person is within time. Like pandemic, for example, is such a good example of that, where people are usually in control of their lives. And then all of a sudden, one day, every single person is not.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much uncertainty.
To uncertainty.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, so that was kind of the initial thought. And since then it's taken many forms.
Yeah. As it would. I mean, it would be it's such a hard thing to pin down, especially when research, it usually focuses on like one aspect of the experience where it's like, oh, this is a common trigger. Here's some statistics that are, from 2012. And it's like, you can barely even compare 2012 to today in a lot of ways, just with the amount of our we cannot not be entangled with technology.
Exactly.
Whereas in 2012, most of our parents, I don't think, had cell phones. Like,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, exactly.
It's completely different.
Exactly. And as I started to look at like all of the psychological studies and empirical research, what often happens, although psychologists seem to know what they're talking about, there's not very much precision between like the different concepts that they're using. And so I started seeing that as well in anxiety. So, how do you define anxiety? Oftentimes it's just, a state of worry or feeling uncertain or fear about future events that might be dangerous, that may or may not happen.
Right. I was looking this up online.
Perfect.
Before, because I was like, I'm going to actually research something. So my listeners are probably just like, she did what?
You're so professional.
Completely shook. I know. I'm going to whip up my laptop right now because I kept tabs open. But technology is good.
Is it? That's a different combo.
Right now, you know what? Right now, because I can't remember anything that I looked at from earlier.
That's true.
Because I was just wondering, I'm like, okay, how do we just, let's say what is anxiety?
Exactly.
Like when someone here's what the internet's saying. Here's what Medical News Today says.
Perfect.
Symptoms. There are many similarities between the symptoms of stress and anxiety. I was also looking at that. I'm like, when does stress become anxiety? Like, what's the difference here? Because personally, I don't think I have anxiety around a lot of things that maybe I should. And I'm like, okay, I should be more like stressed about this or.
Right.
But anyways, I'm kind of even keel. So I'm like, maybe I'm broken. I don't know. But so I'm like, okay, when does stress become anxiety? Like, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, when someone is stressed, they may feel faster heartbeat, faster breathing, anxious thoughts, moodiness. So it's like, they just say anxious thoughts, and it's like they're not really specifying, but that's fine. Moodiness, irritability, general unhappiness, feeling of being overwhelmed, loneliness, nausea, dizziness.
And that's for stress.
This is for stress.
Okay.
But then when someone is anxious, they might experience faster heartbeat, faster breathing, a feeling of unease or dread. Sweating, diarrhea, or constipation. They also said that for stress. Nervousness, tenseness, and restlessness.
Yeah. So those seem like the same to me, right? Like stress and anxiety on their description.
Similarly, I feel like anxious is more restlessness. It's more physicality almost of like tense.
Right.
It's like restlessness where like you're moving around, you can't sleep probably. Yeah. You're really tense physically, like... Your body is tense.
That's...
Or like the unease or dread. I think I honestly think that's like the biggest thing that I especially have heard from the people I know who have anxiety, from clinical anxiety. They just feel this feeling of dread.
Right.
And like doom, impending doom coming. And I'm like, that sounds fucking horrible. And I can't imagine what that's like when there's no doom.
Right.
It's just a job interview.
Yeah.
There's no doom. You're going to live through that, probably.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, wow, how the brain assesses something as...
dangerous.
How it assesses something, well, as like relatively normal, as like a job interview, as something that is like a threat to my well-being and existence. Yeah. To me, I'm like, when does that... Like, how do we understand that from a larger...
Yeah. No, exactly. So that like gets into a lot of different points. So what I'm working on currently is what is anxiety? Before I was working on anxiety disorder. And, they're obviously related. But even in discussing anxiety disorder, we need to be clear about what anxiety is. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. It does have a physical component to it. And so, biomedical accounts of anxiety are that there's a hyperactivity of some subcortical system of the brain that's usually associated with detection of threat. And then that causes there to be like different changes, bodily changes, right? So the activation of the sympathetic nervous system where you feel like flight or fight and all those different aspects come out. Mm-hmm. that's obviously a component, but I don't think that's like the only component of anxiety. And so when I started to look at what anxiety actually is, and it seems that most people describe it as an emotion, now I've been looking at emotional theories as well. And so, for instance, there are some that have somatic theories of emotion. So basically, it's a perception of the bodily change, and that kind of registers that there's a threat out there. And so that's how they would describe anxiety, which I think would be maybe consistent with some of those symptoms. But I do think it's missing a component. And maybe this goes back to like the dread or the doom. But I think that when you think of how anxiety actually feels, like from a phenomenological, what it's like perspective, anxiety, at least for me and for some other people I've talked to, there's like an alienation there. So you feel alienated from like your environment, from your projects. You don't know how to interact with the world at this moment. And I think that that's like an aspect of anxiety that hasn't been captured in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I'm like, a lot of people that I know that have anxiety, like that's definitely, they like cannot interact socially.
Yeah, exactly.
And they like fall off the map for a while.
Yeah.
And don't want to be seen or heard or interacted with at all.
Yeah, exactly. So I had like social anxiety growing up, and it's exactly that. Like, just quick anecdote.
Yeah. We're all about anecdotes.
So I remember being in high school, and I was like going to this college party or whatever, and I was meeting these college girls who were really pretty, and this one was just like, "Hey, how are you?" And only thing I could say back was, "Hey, how are you?" Like in the exact same cadence. And like that was kind of an example of my social anxiety manifesting, where it's like your brain kind of shuts off. Like you're no longer processing the information or like, you know, the stimuli of your present environment. Like that's where sense making in that term I was using earlier breaks down. Like you're no longer apt to engage with the world because you're kind of consumed in these like conceptual thoughts, I think, and the conceptual content of like, they might not like me, or whatever the content of the threat might be for you. And then your body is reacting to the content of your thought rather than the present environment.
I see.
Yeah. And then because your body is in that threatened state, you then anticipate a threat, which is the anticipatory nature of anxiety. So that's where I think like the doom feeling comes, is because some content that we're thinking about is threatening. We react physiologically to that, and then we think in this moment that there's some threat that's going to happen too.
Right.
Yeah.
And then adrenaline. I'm just keep thinking about adrenaline right now. I'm like, I feel like the times where maybe I have had anxious episodes, I feel like I'm really, there's a lot of adrenaline pumping as well,
right.
in like a deer in the headlights Frozen way. Like,
yeah,
if that makes sense. Like when you are like so overwhelmed that you can't really move, you're kind of just paralyzed almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like another distinction that's good to make and sometimes difficult to make is between fear and anxiety.
Right.
And oftentimes the difference will be, as described by psychologists, will be like the differences in behavior that happen. So the kind of freezing and those kind of things seem to happen more in like a fearful state, whereas anxious will be like avoiding things, or anxious will be hypervigilance, right? So if you have social anxiety like I do, then when you're in a situation with people, you then hyper focus on like their facial expressions, or you like interpret things that are ambiguous as more negative. Right. So like not only do you have the physiological, but you also have a different way of processing the information around you, right? Yeah. So
I think that happens to me when I smoke weed.
Yeah.
I think that's why I can't do it. Because I start to sit there. And I remember growing up even like just staring at people, and I'm like, are they like seeing me right now? And I can only imagine what I actually was doing with my face. Like I've been told I have a very expressive face.
Right.
And to like
not have you don't that hide look, anything.
So I cannot imagine what I was actually. Okay, anyways,
your eyes were probably just like big, big,
just like staring, like so intently, not blinking, just freaky. But if I compare it to that state, I mean, there's a lot going on there. It's almost like you can't read anymore. Like you're reading of a person's face.
Everything's biased. Right. And this is actually shown in a lot of empirical evidence as well, like the intentional biasing that happens with people who have anxiety disorder.
Right. Intentional bias. I'm thinking like you see what you want to see in this person.
And that goes back to
your thoughts.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And that goes back to the inactivism aspect, right? Like we're no longer just passively perceiving the world. We're like kind of, not creating it either. We're not constructing it, but we are focusing on certain aspects, and that changes how reality feels for us or shows up for us. It's all really interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like it's always evolving, and then, and then even like over a weekend you have an experience and you're like, wait, what happened here?
Yeah, so the biasing actually happens in attention. It also happens in interpretation. So like I said, like if there's an ambiguous situation, you'll interpret it as more negative. It also happens in memory as well. So you remember negative things more than you do positive things of an event.
I've read this. I've read this.
So it really does change the way we process information as well. And so I think an account of emotion, if anxiety is an emotion, I'm not sure if it is. I might want to say it's a mood, like something kind of more fundamental. And
like a transitioning state?
Yeah,
perhaps?
Like something that is like a mode of being, right? Rather than like an emotional state. Like I think it might be something that's more fundamental that might give rise to emotions like fear, but that it ultimately changes how we interact with the world. And so I think that either we need to have an emotion theory that captures that or have some understanding of mood as that, or existential feeling, as some philosophers call it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's something that's like kind of coloring your experience of the world, right? And that's why it's so difficult to kind of eradicate.
Right.
Yeah.
Because probably everyone's experience too is triggered or it's lived differently. So how do you really quantify these things, and how do you really pin it down when it's so
well, and that's like another huge problem in psychology. Such a great word.
Vast.
Yeah.
Vast differences between organisms. You're doing that voice.
What is that accent? It's like
I don't know. My friend
Scandinavian.
Steph does it all the time, and it's this weird voice, and we do it on Instagram all the time with the, that face filter with like the big cheeks and the lips. We're always doing this. Oh, I just got back from the doctor. And like we don't know what accent
that is like Nordic or something.
Yeah, hopefully. Anyways.
But yeah, another problem in psychology or psychiatry rather, is how to categorize disorders.
Yeah.
So like you just said, like everyone's anxiety is kind of subjective, the fact that like what is a threat to you might not be a threat to me. It's based on like personal history and reinforcement and all those kinds of things. And so how do you categorize like anxiety disorders with phobias and PTSD and OCD used to be included in that. It's no longer included.
Really?
Yeah.
I was reading the article I was reading today. They still included it as like, they included phobias, which like I don't really think about phobias at all in my daily life.
Yeah.
I used to have a phobia of balloons, but I'm like really trying to get over it. I know, it's like really dumb, but
is there a story there?
There's a story. I don't know if I've told it before, but I was working at Cinzeo in high school, and it's like a cinnamon bun place, obviously by the name. And some guy came up behind me as I was like doing something with a dough bag, and like they were really thin, just plastic, like kind of Safeway produce bags, like those thinner ones. Came up behind me and like popped it, and it was so loud it actually like burst my eardrum, and it was all watery and I couldn't hear out of it for a while, and I was like traumatized thinking, oh my god, I'm 15, I can never hear trance music again. Like I'm totally like I'm gonna go deaf. Worry. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, but Armin van Buuren is coming next month, I'm never gonna like be able to hear it live, and I was freaking out, but it was so scary. And then after that, I didn't even realize, like, it just manifested into balloons, anything that could pop. And I was like, oh, my God. And people thought it was a joke, which is always...
If you think about it, like, that's kind of amazing that our minds and our bodies can recognize similar stimuli that were threatening or harmful in the past. Like, so it's like a protective thing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's like that pops.
anxiety. Yeah.
That can pop.
that
bike
pops
tire,
real
that
loud.
can pop.
Just imagine you walking around, like, counting the things that can
It's
pop.
like something, yeah. Well, like, you don't count. You just like see it, and you're like, oh fuck, don't hit a fan. Like,
But
don't
here's
hit
the thing,
like the roof. Like,
if you and I walked into the same room, I might not even,
Right.
recognize that there's a balloon up there. Like, but you have
swirl around the ceiling fan. I'm just like,
yeah, you have,
the impending
hypervigilance.
feeling of doom coming
Right.
because I see this ceiling fan with the balloon just hovering around.
That's so funny. I mean,
I'm
not
like, let's
funny,
make this like, well, let's make anxiety visual for people.
Yeah.
I feel like we can visualize that enough. And,
yeah, for sure. I mean, and so, yeah, like phobias are definitely included. But again, that teeters on the edge of like fear and anxiety. So
Right.
it's like the phobia usually presents itself when you're in the presence of that thing.
Right.
Right? Like when you see the spider. But I guess it's still included in anxiety disorders because you might avoid certain situations because there might be spiders or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's still affecting your life in that kind of way.
So it's more, so then you're saying that anxiety is more focused, or we should think of it more as the avoidance state, the isolationist state of stressor, of an experience, perhaps, or like of a trigger. Is that rehashing what we just talked about?
Well, so like the behavioral aspect is just an easy way to kind of differentiate between like fear and anxiety. So that, there is like avoidance behavior usually in cases of anxiety that then kind of reinforce that anxiety. So like if I just keep using social anxiety because it's a really great one.
I think it's really common too.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that a lot of people have anxiety, and I feel like social anxiety is like a huge, like it's so common.
Right. And so, this is the same for like maybe other phobias as well. So like social anxiety, social phobia. But, say your friend invites you to a party and you want to go, but then you have all of these thoughts about like, you're going to embarrass yourself. What are people going to think about you? Yada, yada, yada. And that causes you all this distress and, you feel sick and you feel uneasy. And so you stay home. You avoid the situation. Well, you've avoided a threat to your mind and your body. And then that reinforces that behavior the next time the situation arises again. So now you're more likely in the future to avoid that situation again because avoidance in the past meant no harm, right? So it's just kind of like reinforces these patterns of thinking for us sometimes. And like, with phobias, oftentimes the therapy is like exposure therapy, like if you're scared of spiders, like holding a spider, touching a spider, just to kind of, I guess, encroach on those beliefs that like I'm gonna die if I hold a spider.
Yeah, like surviving them.
Yeah, exactly.
Those repeated survival.
Right. We have no competing information if we avoid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
that's a great way to put it.
Right. So like you're scared to go to that party. Well, go. And then you'll realize that like these people are your friends. They'll be competing information.
You might actually have fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Could be horrible too.
Could be horrible.
But at least for sure.
But then you did it and you didn't die.
Yeah.
Yes. Right? Like that seems to be the underlying issue there.
Yeah.
That there's like an existential threat is part of it maybe. Yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I was thinking because you've been to India so many times, you're very interested in Tibetan and Buddhist philosophy.
Yes.
How have you been finding that? Like, let's incorporate that into your, anxiety chats. Because I was actually doing my research earlier. They actually said that some methods of like how to help is there like do like meditate.
Yeah.
Or other things that were on the internet.
Mindfulness or
something
yoga,
like journaling.
journaling.
Yoga, exercise, like these types of things.
Right.
And that's obviously a part of your study too. So I'm like, let's tie that in.
Yeah. So, I guess from the decision of my advisors and myself, I'm not going to be incorporating my Buddhist studies in my dissertation just because it would be doing too much.
Right.
To like philosophically engage with the Buddhist philosophy, I would have to do so much more literature review and research, and I would never finish. I mean, that's its own project maybe in the future.
Okay.
But it obviously influences my like worldview and my view on anxiety and my view on just sense making in general, like how people engage in the world. So that's kind of informed a lot of what I'm saying, and I'll probably have like a foreword or like in the intro say that, right?
A bit of your background.
Exactly.
Of like, this is how
Yeah. So, when I was in India, so the last time I went was using what I had learned previously in a therapeutic relationship with people. So it's actually like using your skills to then help the other person get into a better state of themselves as like they're talking to you about things. But all of that kind of builds off of the studies that I had done there. And basically it looks at the philosophy and also the psychology of Buddhist philosophy. So Buddhist philosophy has like a specific way that they understand the mind working. And there's four schools of Buddhism, and they describe it differently. And so there's all different stuff out there. Like it's hard to say like, this is the Buddhist idea of blank, right?
Okay.
But what I can say is that at least in some schools, their way of understanding how the mind works, they separate perception and cognition, right? So like perception would be through the five senses. And cognition is like sixth mind is what they call it. And it has its own special object. All of the sense minds do. So like sight can only see, can only understand objects of sight, and hearing objects of hearing, and all of these different things. And so cognition can only have objects of mind, concepts. And so basically what I had learned in my studies, what I had understood from my studies, I might be wrong, but any wrong is on my part, not the part of my teachers.
Throw them under the bus too. It's all their fault. I'm just kidding.
So basically,
but maybe not.
Basically that
we're all learning.
Everyone's learning.
Everyone knows a lot, but they don't know everything.
That's true.
That's how we roll here on Graduated Podcast.
That's
we know a lot, but we don't know everything.
That's true. And basically, like in Buddhism, there is a thing called ultimate truth, which is like ultimate reality. You can't pinpoint. It's constantly changing. And in some schools, like it's emptiness. Anyway, so back to the mind.
Yeah.
So you can have an aspect of thought that's based on like a moment of five sense mind. So basically like, oh, I can see this red apple, and then I can have a thought about a red apple. But I also could have a thought about a previous thought. So I see that red apple, and then I think, oh, like I really like the movie Snow White. And then that leads me to a thought about like, oh, I don't know, princesses in Disney, and like all, you can see how that can like continue.
All I'm thinking is, oh, how I don't like red delicious apples. Like that's where that thought leads me.
Wait, which ones do you like? Gala?
Yeah, I like a gala. Sometimes it depends on the season. You have to smell an apple.
I didn't know that.
You have to. Well, I do.
Yeah.
You have to smell. If you can't smell the apple, it's probably not going to taste very good.
That makes sense.
That's just my personal assessment.
Right.
So I use multiple senses.
There you go. Yeah.
When I'm at the grocery store.
Exactly.
And they pull down my mask and sniff.
See this girl over there.
Arrest me. Look at that girl sniffing apples. Psycho. Anyways.
But basically, the idea is that humans now are too caught up in conceptual reality. We're constantly thinking about, even like thinking about the things that we're seeing rather than like directly perceiving them.
I see. So just existing in the moment with the things
right,
around us.
Exactly.
We're conceptualizing too much.
Yes. We conceptualize too much. We live too much.
Overthinking.
Yeah, exactly. And then, tie in phones and social media, then you're thinking about the thing. It's just so many levels of abstraction and conceptualization.
Let's maybe talk about that a little bit, like the social media aspect. It's like, I was thinking about this today too, because I'm like, this will come up, but it's a whole other planet.
Yeah.
Like, it really is its own world. Like, Instagram itself is an entire world that you have to maintain. You have to interact with.
Identity that you have to maintain.
100%. There's people on there you got to chat with. There's people that want things. There's stuff you have to do. There's things that you think, oh, I should be doing this. Oh, I'm missing it. You're seeing so much of so many other things.
Yeah.
And it's like a flat experience. So you're not getting the sensory.
Yeah. You might be getting visual. Yeah. That's exactly right. And that's kind of like goes into my hypothesis about being alienated from your present environment. Like, we're no longer in our bodies, especially when you're scrolling through Instagram. I don't know about you, but like sometimes after you scroll, you feel worse. You feel disconnected because you're no longer aware of your body sense. And that's why people say meditate, do yoga, like all of these things, exercise, because that gets you back in tune with a good feeling of yourself, a feeling that's based on the senses.
Right. Like a physicality experience.
A feeling that is like grounded rather than like a feeling that's based on conceptual thought. Which, if you're thinking, this person just went to Mexico or this person just made a blog or like did all these things that I should be doing.
Wow, they look so successful.
Yeah.
I'm not posting that on the internet.
Yeah.
So I'm not successful either.
Each one of our thoughts has an associated affect or feeling, positive or negative, like everything does. And so, you know, if you're thinking those things as you're scrolling through and then you're basing your self-feeling on those things rather than like the feeling of your body right now, then yeah, that just creates the space for anxious feelings and anxious thoughts to like come in, you know?
Enter the room.
Right. But if you have a good feeling of your body and a good feeling of yourself based on that, then there's no room for anxious thoughts, feelings, etc.
Because you know they're not real.
Yeah, it's not based, it's a conceptual reality rather than a natural reality, for sure. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering too, because there's a lot of like push towards, I'm just wondering, there's so much like body positivity, like my personal, wouldn't say it's a struggle, but I would say the one thing I'm very conscientious of constantly is like my body. Like I'm always working out, eating proper food. Like I'm hyper.
You are very like health oriented.
It's definitely to do with the way I was raised, but I'm seeing a lot of these pushes now of like, I mean, we were raised with low-rise jeans.
Oh my
gosh,
gosh,
can't have like a speck of fat on you because it would look horrible. And if you didn't have like, it was so, you know, it was definitely very traumatizing.
Would you go back to low-rise jeans?
Hell no. Okay, didn't even fit. Like I honestly can barely even wear pants as it is. Like when you got this much junk in the trunk, kind of.
I tried to put on some low-rise that I have from so long ago. And they don't fit.
Like I can't, like there's just no way, but so that's not happening. But but no, there's these huge push towards like body positivity, and I'm seeing all these TikToks of these teens being like, millennials, they're negative or whatever because they had to wear low-rise jeans, and you know, now we're all body positive, our generation, and we accept all bodies, and I'm like, okay. It's nice to see like, okay, you're like, yeah, this body isn't, we're going to accept this body too, or we're going to, you know, show more
inclusive
varietals of bodies. And I'm like, okay, that's one stimuli.
Right.
And
look at you with the jargon.
I know. It's in there, let me tell you. So that's one version.
Yeah.
But then also the experiential, I don't know. It's like to what extent does that actually have a positive impact on your brain?
Yeah.
And actually someone's self-worth. Yeah. Like just seeing it repetitively, it's like, yes, you're seeing it repetitively on a screen, but
does it intrude and actually change?
How much does that conceptualize in your brain as something, how you see yourself?
Yes. Very good question.
And
this goes back to like different therapies, I think, for anxiety. So like what I hear when I hear you ask that question kind of sounds like cognitive behavioral therapy to me. So like CBT, it does work. Lots of people find it really helpful. But oftentimes, like, it's not that great for people, or like the retention rate of the benefits isn't that great. But CBT basically says anxiety is like, has to do with our thoughts, our beliefs. And so there's too much focus on the self, too much negative talk of the self, et cetera, et cetera. So if you change the beliefs, you change your state, you change anxiety. And so that sounds similar to me of what you're saying. Like, you're seeing all this conceptual understanding of like, oh, okay, my body is accepted or whatever, right? Like, I don't need to feel bad about my body. But how much is that conceptual thought really altering the feeling that you have, right? And so, like, that's one of the things that I think CBT sometimes misses, is that replacing positive thoughts for the ones that were negative sometimes can have a beneficial effect, but it seems more like a Band-Aid to me. We need to penetrate further. We need to go down to the self-feeling, and we need to have like a self-feeling based on what it feels like to be in my body, not an idea of my body or the image of my body or something like that, but like that it feels good to be in your body. And you get that sense when you meditate, and you can feel not only your fingers, but your feet and your seat and your torso all at the same time. And you're fully like spatially in your body, and that feels good. And so using that as the base for which then you build your self-reference, your self-idea on, I think is more instrumental and more helpful than just, oh, other people are accepting my body now, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you turn off your phone and you try and go to sleep.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, like at the end of the day, you are with yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're depending on what other people find exclusive or inclusive, or what other people think is, you know, beautiful or not beautiful, then you're still at a threat of that going away, right? And so you shouldn't seek like external validation, which in a way that is a little bit of external validation of like, oh, okay, like the beauty world thinks that more bodies are beautiful. Like, that's great. It really is. But that shouldn't be the basis around which you feel about yourself, you know?
I do know. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like my kind of, you know, question when I see all of these things, like, oh, accept this, accept this. There's like so much. Yeah.
It seems like just words at that point.
Yeah. To me, I'm like, to what extent is this actually helping people? Especially because more people have anxiety now.
Yes, they do.
Than ever.
And the younger people have more anxiety than we do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then they're, you know, telling us about acceptance and all of these things. And it's like, okay, but then there's still... Yeah. What else are we missing? Like, there's clearly something missing. And I think you're right. Yeah, you said that. But exactly.
I mean, you also brought up a good point of like
something about TikTok.
No. Oh, I mean, well, you kind of like, you know, you mentioned it before, like all of these youths are on the Instagram.
Oh God,
I know. Scratch that, Kitty.
Yeah, scratch that, Kenny. You gotta say it in a sexy voice.
Scratch it, Kitty. No,
that's good. Just content over here, Kenny.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone is on it. Everyone has a cell phone. Everyone's so engaged, and
right.
I feel like this
I remember
is just now. Yeah. Okay.
You said it earlier, like. It's now something else you have to keep up with. Like it's this other persona of yourself. It's this other identity. And I think that is the source of the anxiety for not only us, but especially young people. So it's like that is a thing that is under constant threat. Like you have to constantly support it, right? And you have to support it such that like it gets validation from other people. And I think that makes it something that is like very anxious because it's out of our control in a certain way, or anxious inducing. And then, yeah, like you can be body positive and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it seems like people care about likes and people care about all of those validations from other people. And so it comes down to a point of like identity, I think, and ultimately the self, which ties back into Buddhism. So if you think the self is under threat, that creates this feeling of anxiousness. And what is the self? Well, it can be some identity that you have. It could be like, oh, well, I have a certain job. And so if that job comes under threat, then I feel anxious and all that stuff. But it can also be like, I have a certain identity or persona that I have on social media, and I have to keep that up. Right. And yeah, I think that's kind of what's happening with a lot of the young people and us.
Us too.
Yeah.
I know. I think when I post things, I'm like, you know, I don't want to post like any. I don't even know how to take pictures of like my butt. If I tried, like, it would just be like
Me too.
It would be like really medical. It would be like instantly like deleted. Yeah, it would be like not good. I just don't think I can bend my arm. I don't know
how you do it. Yeah, you like have to stick things certain places.
I've actually consulted a couple girls once when I was in LA, and I was like, how do you guys pose in pictures?
Right,
Because
yeah.
like, I grew up playing soccer. I didn't grow up playing like doing dance.
Right.
I feel like dancer girls always have way better poses in Instagram pictures than moi. Played soccer, very like,
yeah,
you know, forward, backward moving.
Right,
like,
you've got
no
the like
sort
very
of lateral,
strong
like,
stance. No
yeah,
one's
I
gonna
can
push
run
you
really
over.
I can sprint really fast, but like I look awful. So I'm
That's
like, how
not
do
even
I?
true.
But,
Podcast
like,
people, that's not true.
But no. But it's like, but it's once again the perception of myself in this picture. I'm not used to having pictures taken of myself. So when I see one, I'm like, oh, like I don't know how to, you know, project the image that I want to see.
Right.
So I guess actually, I actually do. It kind of stresses me out. Like I get very like camera shy. Like that's very much a thing for me.
Yeah.
I don't like it because I'm like, oh, it's not going to be how I see myself.
Right.
I already know it's not going to be the way that I see myself. So I feel like I have a very strong sense of self.
Right.
I like who I like. That's all great. But then when it gets
projected out or something.
Yeah. And then there's photos taken of you. It's like, oh,
yeah,
like, that's not how I see myself.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Like, so it seems like there is a little bit of worry about like how others are going to see you if that's the image that they're presented with rather than like who you are as you interact with people or something like that.
Perhaps. Yeah. And then there's just that disconnect where maybe you can pose really well for pictures. You feel really good about your Instagram persona, your what am I trying to say? Like your
personality on
you,
exactly. Your personality that's abstracted from your page is one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then
you see the self underneath where, you know, you're posting or you have a projection of your identity that's super open, outgoing. Like there's, you know, it's very much physically reading the body language of your poses or pictures or whatever shows that you're a very, how you would read that as a certain way.
Yeah.
But then maybe when you get to know someone, they're actually like, you know, very, very introverted.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily what you would.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do think that those things like definitely come apart and it's interesting that they do, right? And then Instagram culture in a way has like created a platform that idolizes a certain aesthetic and a certain way of presenting yourself and all of that stuff. And so people then have to be that. And I think that that's also anxiety inducing because not only are they having to like keep up with that image that other people seem to like, but then imagine being someone who has made, you know, themselves like famous through that, but imagine them feeling like that's not them. You know what I mean? And then like having to keep that up in their like personal relationships or feel that people might not like accept them for who they are because obviously they like them for this kind of projected persona,
right?
Which I think also happens with sorry for my stutter there.
I love it. We're here for it, girl.
Also happens with famous people too, right?
Oh yeah. Well, like cancel culture, like you know, so people see a side of someone that, you know, isn't flattering because at the end of the day, like my own experience with people in this, I wouldn't want to say they're in the spotlight, but people that are, you know, visually seen, performers,
Yeah.
singers, whatever. They're not perfect people, guys.
No,
Like
they're
they're
people.
really good at one thing. It's
Yeah.
honestly the fame is a side effect of the job.
Right.
It's
yeah.
like it's work. Like
Yeah.
we call it work. It's a job. It's honestly just comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And then when people see unflattering or like, oh, this guy's a pervert, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't go away if they're
Yeah.
a famous person. Like that's kind of always there. And I don't know. So to me, I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, these are fully rounded out individuals with very
Yeah.
huge flaws too, just like the rest of us. So
Yeah. Yeah. I do agree. Like,
I don't know how that really relates to anxiety, but I think
No,
a
I
lot of
think it
people are
does.
kind of it's a fear-inducing thing too. They're like
Yeah.
afraid to say certain things
for
or
sure.
to be too honest
For
or to
sure.
tell someone they don't like something because of they're afraid of whatever the
Well, and especially
result
if like
might be.
that's part of like your job, right? Like so you even like models and actors, when you apply for certain positions, they ask how many followers you have. So then now you have to cater to, you know, all these people that you don't know, of creating an image that maybe doesn't represent you. And then you have this anxiety about like keeping that up so that you do get the work or whatever. And then any anxiety around posting, like I know famous people from Arkansas who anytime they would post, like would just be so anxious, right? And obsess over who liked it, who didn't like it, who unfollowed, like all of those little aspects, because they took that as a reflection of themselves, right? Like that this person didn't like that, so they must not like me, or they don't like my art, so they must not like me. And it often comes back down to this like self is being vulnerable or the self is being threatened. And so I can see like, yeah, how that can be anxiety inducing for sure. And I will say like, you know, the thing with influencers who have made a job out of it as well, like similar for them as well. And then the part where it comes back to young people who are exposed to that content, and then, you know, maybe it causes them to have anxiety around themselves or like self-worthlessness around their body or something like that. Like, you know, those are different like moral discussions, I guess, on like what should be posted or like how we should present ourselves, knowing that it's going to be consumed by other people. But I do think like we see certain images and we just immediately abstract from that or make evaluations, and then we compare to ourselves. And oftentimes the evaluation isn't actually the truth. So like you see somebody who's like on a yacht and all this stuff, and you think that their life is perfect, or you think that they are somehow morally superior and all of these things. Like you make assumptions about that person, and then you compare yourself, and then that's where you start having, you know, more negative thoughts. So I do think like, yeah, we can try to get away from that by realizing that they are just real people.
Yeah.
And like
that too. And I think, yeah, that's just we're missing the other five senses too. If we want to go Buddhist with it, you know, we're only getting the visual.
Yeah.
We're not getting the other four senses.
Yeah, and sixth sense, like the mind sense is also one, but yeah.
Right. Or it's not fully informed.
Yeah, exactly.
Too, because we're not having all of the senses too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right? I mean, like, and the more information you have, the better sense of the situation you have. And all we've seen is a snapshot. So all we have is a visual representation of one moment in someone's day. And we build a narrative around what their life must be like, and then compare that to us.
Make sense of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking just now about, I know a lot of people that have that with anxiety, but they like go through phases where they delete Instagram or they have it, don't have it. It's like they really have a tough time interacting with that altogether. Like it's just so overwhelming.
Right.
And I'm like, that's actually interesting because all of the people I know that do have trouble with the like Instagram or Facebook or social media in any sort of way actually do have like anxiety, or like a lot of them don't have it at all. So I'm like, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not trying to like broadly, you know, some people just aren't interested, which is totally fair.
Yes.
But
yeah, like I have a friend who doesn't have Facebook because like she said, quote, I don't don't want to keep up with people that I knew in high school. Like why, which I resonate with a little bit. Like, of course I care about them and I wish them well, but you only have a certain amount of like time in each day and a certain amount of like mental cognition in each day, mental resources. And so to be filling it with like images and thoughts of people that you don't interact with on a, daily basis, like it's helpful in some ways, but in some senses, like it is distracting or takes up a lot of time and things like that. So I do understand not having it for those reasons as well. But for the anxiety cases, like, yeah, obviously it's something that they don't enjoy and they've recognized that it's not something good for them. I mean, like, I'll be honest, like I definitely have a dependence on social media that wasn't there before the pandemic. And often, or for me at least, it happened with like the George Floyd incident, like his murder. And then after that in the protest, I just was glued to live feeds and Facebook and trying to see what was happening. And then that's just kind of, yeah, exactly. And that's just kind of like maintained itself, unfortunately. But I do know what you mean. People that often like stop using it, they'll like post a little thing like, I'm going to take some space, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And I think that's helpful for sure.
Yeah. Like definitely, especially when it's like half of someone's life is also on there. Yeah. And then to just go away from it for a while, it's like, it's people can definitely interpret that in a way if they're thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
So with your own, to kind of circle away from social media, because it's just, I feel like we could go on for ages.
For sure. Yeah. It's such a cesspool.
What are like things that you do? Because you were saying like, you've used a lot of Buddhist, practices in your own experiences. I'm sure everyone wants to know what you do when you're feeling an anxious, like what do you call them? Like a fit of anxiety or like a moment. How do you cope? Like, what is your personal way about it?
Yeah. I think like the first step is like becoming just aware of one's own thoughts. So you're having thoughts all the time. Like you're having internal dialogue about everything that you're seeing, and all of that stuff is happening oftentimes like under the surface. And so kind of trying to bring those things to light. And ways to do that is meditating. So just focusing on your breath, or like single pointed meditation, meaning like focus on one thing or try to, and you'll notice. So you can focus on your breath or focus on like something in front of you, or you can focus on an
like
image.
A little rock or something.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Like a rock or an image in your mind. Or you can focus on a mantra, or you can focus on like compassion, or all those different things. Like, but the point is to direct your attention and your focus to one thing. When you do that, you'll start to realize that the mind jumps around all the time, and it can be like very unsettling. But when you correct it, like, so don't get mad at yourself that it gets distracted. Like that's just what the mind does. So then like slightly correct it back to the thing that you want to be focusing on. And in doing that, you start to have discipline and you start to have awareness of your own mind. You can also do just open meditation or open-mindedness meditation, where you just kind of sit there and just observe the thoughts. And that's also good at just seeing how they are chained together and seeing like what contents come up and go away. And try not to like stick to one thought. So oftentimes, like if I'm sitting there, then I'm thinking, okay, what do I want to have for dinner? Like, what do I need to do today? And if I focus on one of those, then the next thought is attached to that, right? And like I'm like down a chain of thoughts now about this one thing. Try not to do that. If you notice that you do, gently guide yourself back, but just pay attention to how thoughts come up and go away. So that's like the first step.
Is that called mindfulness? Is that what people mean by mindfulness?
Yes, I think so. I mean, so real meditation, I think involves a lot more. Like, so it involves getting yourself into a certain state, and then at that state, then you can do investigations. That's the mindfulness on like the practices that I do, or sorry, meditation on the practices that I do. But yeah, so this stuff is more like mindfulness, like just being aware of one's own mind, or mind training. And then what has been helpful for me is how I've been saying that, like, anxiety is a state of being where one is alienated from the present environment, and we're no longer engaged in sense making in relation to what's around us, but rather to the content of our thoughts. So if I start to notice, so that's where you have to be able to notice. If I start to notice that my thoughts are shifting towards like being negative, or they're about the future things, or like certain things that might be threatening to me, and I notice that I'm starting to get agitated, then I'll recognize
like some sort of physical response.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe like I'll have tingling or something like that, like all those little signals. Then I'll recognize that like I'm responding physically to the content of my thoughts, not what's going on around me. So then I'll kind of reassess the situation and get back in touch with my body. You can use the 5 senses, which oftentimes people say for like anxiety disorders or panic disorders, like name 5 things you can see, name 5 things you can hear. And that's doing the same thing of getting you back in the body and getting you back in like a direct sense experience of the world, rather than one that's based on conceptual content. And so I'll start doing that, of like getting back into my body, feeling my own breath, and building a sense of self-feeling from that, of like, I'm good. And now from this feeling of like stability that I've created, I can then think about those future things without getting upset, or without having like the negative affect that was previously attached.
Right, because you've assessed that there is no threat.
Yeah, exactly.
Current to you.
Currently, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just trying to pull the like initial cause away of the self-feeling, and create a good base.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I personally, like when I've, was in school and had a lot of stuff going on at the same time, I would always just journal. Like I still journal when things are really, I'm trying to figure out my own thoughts or whatever. Like that was a huge one for me.
Yeah.
That was like,
journaling's
like,
great.
When I wake up, it's like, I'm like laying there in bed, just like thinking about shit till like 2 a.m. I'm like, oh, it's like a weekday. I got to get up for work. This is stressing me out, the fact that I have to work soon. So I'll just, turn the light on, grab a pen, and I'll just journal what my mind's thinking. Like, oh my God, I'm awake again at this time. Like, why? And then I just go and I write down that whole chain of thought that just won't stop repeating in my head. And then I'm out like a light right after that.
Yeah.
But you got to get it all out.
Yeah,
all
exactly. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's also a way of like becoming aware of those thoughts, right? Like oftentimes if your mind is just racing, then you can't really like pinpoint what it's actually about. Where like journaling might be helpful in that situation.
Because then you can see, you're like, oh, okay, this is how we get there.
Yeah.
It kind of makes it more
real. But I
real.
think also in journaling, like it forces you to slow down.
Totally.
And then now you're using your hand and you're like engaging with this stuff in a different way. And it's very grounding again.
Yeah.
Brings
you back down to reality.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, well, I think that's like, how we want to maybe wrap it up.
Yeah,
I don't
that sounds
know.
good. Yeah.
Sad, but we could go on for ages. But, there's some tools. Obviously, Allie is super knowledgeable about this topic. So if you guys have questions or anyone's curious, hit her up, hit me up of how to hit Allie up, whatever like you got to do. Email me somehow. I don't know. You can reach out. Just DM me on Instagram.
There you go.
I'm very live in the DMs. But thank you so much for being on
Thanks
the
for having
show,
me.
on the pod.
This was great.
Yeah, this was fun. This was long overdue, actually. Allie and I have been trying to do this.
We
tried
did
to do
one
it over Zoom.
Yeah.
I was trying to think today about what it was about, and I can't remember.
Well, it was supposed to just be a practice. And then we were like, oh, that's like pretty good. And then I showed it to Jordan, and he was like, the sound is horrible.
Yeah, he's like, the sound is horrible. Like, yeah, and I'm like, I'm down to post. I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
He's like, no.
Yeah.
And then we're like, yeah, I guess not.
And then we were like, let's redo it. And then we just never did.
Yeah. Well, no, now then this is it. This is it.
Yes.
When we're,
when it was
both
meant to be.
Clear of mind.
Yeah.
We're very present. My butt is sweaty. I'm very grounded in my seat.
There you go, yeah.
But yeah, no, this was so exciting. And yeah, hit me up any questions. And thanks so much. You'll hear from me very soon. Hello. Thanks so much for listening to Allie and I chat about her thesis about anxiety. Here's my afterthoughts.
After thoughts. I had a couple weeks actually between this one to think about it, and I don't know, I just re-listened to it, and I think it's pretty thorough. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you would want clarity on. I mean, it's such a huge topic. I mean, we discussed quite a few things. You know, Tibetan philosophy, Buddhism, um, anxiety, philosophy of mind, psychology. There's so much that goes on there, but so I can't imagine actually having to write a thesis. So good luck to Allie on that. But one thing that I think would be kind of interesting to take away from the whole conversation is just kind of the actual journey in itself of learning that Allie's been on. Like, think about it. I mean, she's been going to school for so many years, and she's been studying one thing, like philosophy of mind, like mind reading, and all of these types of things, and then enter the human existence of living and going through a global pandemic where everything's out of control. And watching yourself, watching the people around you adapt to chaos like that. And for that to be a trigger, and for that to push her into the direction that she is now, where she's studying, looking into writing her thesis on anxiety, which is something that she struggled with her whole life. But it's interesting that that's what it took. I mean, not what it took, but that's what pushed her in the direction to kind of meld all of these things together that were already around her. So I think that's really beautiful in itself. Like, what an interesting thing to have happened to you. Like, you would never have learned that. Like, maybe she would have come to that conclusion anyway, but for it to be pushed into, for her to be pushed into this realm, and exploring anxiety, which is such a hot topic. But no, like, actually just such a common thing. And I think a lot of people maybe are curious. They've like been diagnosed with anxiety. They feel like they suffer from anxiety for a variety of things. And even me posting, when I posted on Instagram a couple weeks ago that Allie and I talked about anxiety on this podcast, a lot of people reached out about it, just saying like, yeah, I have anxiety. I'm really curious to know what you guys talked about. Even today, people are like, wow, like, I'm really curious to see what's going on. So I hope that answered some questions, and I hope, it gives you guys some sort of realization that a lot of people are going through the feeling of anxiety. And I think the pandemic, especially, studies are coming out now. Like, Allie actually posted this Instagram the other day about just the amount of anxiety and the level of anxiety that people are feeling since the pandemic has like doubled, or is like 4 times the amount. I can't remember the exact statistics. I'm sure you can look it up. But I think that's fascinating. I don't know if there's anything that I should really like cover that I need to kind of discuss from what we talked about. I think we're pretty thorough, and I think that, things in itself, like, obviously she's coming at this from her studies, from like a discourse perspective, from a philosophical perspective, from her background in psychology and philosophy. So obviously, she's not a doctor. Like, she's not here to diagnose you with anxiety. We're more here to help understand anxiety in a way and how it works in the brain, and what functions and what dysfunctions are really going on. So I hope that was made clear if it wasn't already. Just mild disclaimer there. But what it made me think of, just in the whole relation to the journey of learning and that sort of experience of like a lifetime of uncertainty. Like, we really don't know. And that's where kind of a lot of anxiety, I think, comes from, is just the uncertainty of not knowing what someone's thinking or what's a situation is going to unfold. And especially like the pandemic caused a lot of anxiety, just the uncertainty. And I feel this reminds me a lot of the conversation that I had with some folks that I join once a week called Shiur. It's called Shiur, Shiur. And it's once a week. It's a Zoom conversation. It's super cool. I will link it, or you can also just look it up on Instagram, with a bunch of artists, philosophers. And the last week we talked about conformity and what it means to have a conformist perspective. And this kind of made me think about what we hold on to, and these beliefs and ideas that we really, really hold on to, even when sometimes we don't really necessarily believe them anymore, but we're almost too afraid or uncertain of what it would mean if we were to oppose what we previously believed is true, like in like to be a hypocrite, or to feel like, not to be a hypocrite, but to feel like we're being hypocritical of our own actions from the past, or kind of these things that we're holding on to, even though it may not be where we're at anymore. And I think that can cause anxiety, but it makes me think about just the uncertainty and just the whole overarching lesson we can learn just from learning and from not knowing where life is going to take you, and not knowing what you're going to learn and how you're going to change. And just kind of thinking about what things can we let go of? What ideas or beliefs have we had to let go of throughout the years, or maybe that we've adopted, or something that we are grappling with right now, where we're kind of in this in-between space, and we don't really have any desire to be decided. And I don't know if that's anything to do with anxiety or what we talked about in the full conversation, but I think just the state of being uncertain can be really freeing, and to know that you don't have to hold on to some idea that you previously had, and it's okay to let go and move on from things, and to become a different person, and to grow and to move on and be pushed in different directions and try new things, and that is all a part of learning and growing and just overall experiencing more. So I think that's where my head's at with trying to control or predict what can happen in the future, as we don't know. But we also don't need to hold on to an idea as if it's the only thing that could ever bring us joy or bring us happiness, or the only suitable outcome for ourselves and for our lives. There's just so many opportunities, and there's so many different outcomes, and they're all equally incredible. So that's that. I don't want to keep rambling. I don't want to keep ya. But those are my afterthoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed the convo with Allie and I. I'll probably do a follow-up with her, or a check-in. I just really love talking to her. She's super interesting, and she's literally a human book. So any questions you guys have, please ask me, and I'll direct them to Allie, or you can message her directly too. Like, she's super open to that. Thank you once again for listening. I'm if you, this is so like tacky to say at this point, but if you want to sponsor me, you can. Let me know. Hit your girl up. But yeah, thanks so much for listening, and you will hear from me soon.
Kill.